They seized his Congress Street house and claimed his Tahoe. Worse, they took his daughter, inked on paper by expensive suits who thought they had won. Just 10 weeks later, a Forbes magazine rested on a polished Ann Arbor table. The woman sitting across from him looked from the cover photo to his grease-stained coveralls, suddenly realizing they were the exact same man. Eli Brandt did not smile. He was far beyond petty victories now. They took everything paper and expensive lawyers could possibly steal. Nobody bothered to look past his empty pockets. $200. Eli counted the bills twice on a kitchen counter he no longer owned, as if counting it again would somehow make it grow. The divorce papers were finally signed. That beautiful Congress Street house with the porch he hand-built during a warm June, where they marked their daughter's height, belonged to Vanessa now. The Tahoe was entirely hers too. Family court gave her custody, leaving him with strictly supervised visits just 2 short afternoons a week. That word supervised stung, but Eli did not fight back. He had a different plan. We both know anger is useless. Instead, he quietly let her overlook the old garage. She had ignored it for years, dismissing his passion just like she did today. To her, the pile in the corner was what it always was, pure junk. His father's steel toolbox, its red paint worn down to bare metal around the handles. A grease-stained notebook bound tightly by a single rubber band. She called his crate of auto parts garbage, telling him to take his useless scrap. Eli carried the heavy toolbox using both arms the way a man carries, something far heavier than its actual weight, because it belonged to Walt Brandt. Walt had been gone 4 years, but the steel still smelled of hard, honest work. Dolan and Sons Auto on Michigan Avenue had been pitch black for 3 long years. A rusted chain locked the gate, but 70-year-old Hank Dolan still kept the keys. He studied Eli through the grimy window for a minute before finally stepping outside. "Your daddy rebuilt my lathe in '89, Hank said. Wouldn't take a dime. Said a tool that doesn't work is just a sad story," he spat. $200 a month for the back bay, sweep your own floors. Eli moved in. He was broke, sleeping on a cot beside a dead engine, but he was building. That Saturday, little June arrived for her first visit, tightly gripping a folded piece of paper. Only 8 years old, she had drawn a crayon garage with a roll door and window. Across the top, she had carefully written the words, "Daddy's new house." Eli taped her drawing to the metal cabinet door above. His father's toolbox. He stared at it, knowing what he had to do. The county social worker finally showed up on a Thursday. She introduced herself as Marin Vesper, the custody evaluator assigned by the Washtenaw County Court, sounding like a bored bureaucrat reading a script. Armed with a clipboard and checklist, she carefully measured the exact distance from his cot to the exit. She asked where his daughter would sleep, where they would eat, and about the heat. "There will be a proper bed by next week," Eli promised. She scribbled it down. "And your income, I will have it." She saw only a struggling mechanic, and Eli gave her absolutely no reason to look any closer. He answered her direct questions, offering nothing else. Once she left, he got right back to work, the heavy garage door rolling shut on its slow metal chain. Let's watch what quiet determination can build. She returned early next Thursday, finding the door open and June waiting. My daughter sat on an old bucket while I showed her a spinning cooling fan. My garage bay felt a lot warmer that day. I had hooked up a salvaged space heater to a new outlet. A tiny quilt rested on her cot. My own narrow cot sat nearby, made with all the love I had. Marin dropped her bag and began her paid inspection, checking out our electrical outlets, the exits and the smoke alarm I had just put up the week before. At my workbench, she slid my little girl's drawing aside. She was paid to find hidden flaws in my life. Beneath the drawing lay my bound notebook, and right under that, a single page in plastic. A United States patent grant. She stared at the top line twice before the words clicked. Inventor, Eli Brandt. She found a neat stack hiding underneath, filled with my heavy technical work from over the years. Energy storage, thermal control, solid-state architecture that went completely over her head. But she did not need a degree to recognize what I had built. These were the kinds of official documents that completely destroyed the depressing case file she carried on me. The report labeling me a jobless loser, a mere tinkerer in a cold garage. The sad story she had studied for 3 weeks was slowly crumbling in her hands. She kept her mouth shut. She turned, Across the room, I crouched next to June, helping my little girl press her ear to the warm engine. "Listen," I said. "It's breathing. You hear it pull and let go, pull and let go. It's breathing." June whispered back, totally delighted, laughing that pure way my kid did at something real. I never even glanced over at Marin. I never pointed out those patents on my bench, refusing to speak a single word about them. You see, I ignored the one proof that could have erased every doubt in my file instantly. Instead, I simply taught my daughter to find the steady rhythm of an idling engine. Just like my father had once shown a young boy in another garage 30 years ago. My gentle hands did all the talking my mouth refused to. This was the very first thing that broke their official narrative, and Marin's pen completely stopped moving. For a long moment, silence filled the quiet room. I kept my brilliant truth to myself, and Marin decided not to ask me about it. She just watched a poor father teach his child to listen, leaving her questions totally unspoken, which went completely against her training, ignored her checklist, and was not like her usual self. Her phone suddenly buzzed against her clipboard, flashing an urgent message from her strict supervisor. "My custody matter is being rushed. The hearing was pushed forward at my ex-wife's request. Have your recommendation ready early." She read the screen twice, just like my patent. You and I know she had no idea only 9 days remained before an unseen trap would snap shut, flipping my custody battle. She only knew that somebody with serious money had reached into the legal calendar and forcefully dragged it forward. And rich men never did that unless a hidden clock was ticking down on a secret they wanted buried. The danger of losing everything slowly is that you never feel the ground shifting underneath you. One morning you wake up to find the floor completely gone, standing on thin air. Looking back, I finally understood that. 12 years ago, Theo Maddox and I launched Halden Power Systems inside a rented unit off Industrial Highway. Just 2 engineers and a brilliant battery module nobody wanted to fund. I kept those patents because my own hands had drawn them. Then baby June arrived. Vanessa traveled constantly for work, meaning I had to stay home. So I stepped away that March, putting family first during a brutal year when my startup felt completely doomed anyway. My startup shares remained trapped in a founder agreement, utterly useless for buying daily groceries. With my pockets completely empty, I became what the court would later call me, absolutely nothing. But Vanessa was running a hidden timeline I never even saw. She filed for divorce in April, exactly 11 months before my locked shares could finally be sold. By May, she refinanced the house into her name. Come August, she claimed my Tahoe. When autumn hit, she secured the temporary custody order too. Every single blow landed right before my upcoming payday could change my financial reality forever. At first, I blamed my own bad luck and terrible timing. But the timing was calculated. Soon, the entire town blindly swallowed the toxic stories she spun. A local credit union crushed my small business loan application in a flat 4-minute meeting. The banker refused eye contact. Even a trusted parts supplier I had used for 10 solid years suddenly stopped answering my calls. Even the parents I knew from June's school. You and I know that look. They stared like I committed a crime without knowing any real facts. Here is where will beats money. I spent my final dollars on battery cells and a controller board, plus a heavy roll of copper bus bar, keeping this quiet work hidden under a canvas tarp in the back of my bay. Because a broke father living inside a garage and hoarding battery components looked exactly like the unstable troublemaker Vanessa's court file claimed I was. Vanessa coldly restricted my visits via text. She squeezed my Thursdays into a tiny window, leaving me just 40 minutes with my daughter after the long drive. Her excuses piled up. June was too tired, June had homework, this new arrangement was simply better. I read every bitter text from my workbench. I swallowed my pride and never typed my true thoughts. Instead, I wrote my daughter a heartfelt letter in soft pencil about a magic engine and a girl hearing it breathe. I refused to write one single nasty word about her mother. Not one single word, though I held plenty of angry truths I deeply meant. Marin arrived again for what she calmly called an additional check. This time, she hovered in the doorway with her heavy clipboard lowered by her side. "What are you actually going to raise her on?" she asked quietly. That probing question was not printed on her standard form. It was the unspoken judgment beneath it. I slowly wiped my grease-stained hands. I did not invent a fake salary. offer empty promises, or mention the billion-dollar patents sitting right there that could have ended it immediately. When life empties your pockets, your heart answers. I peeled back the tarp, revealing the wired board and racked cells, my relentless, quiet grind. On this, I simply replied, and on what I know how to build with my own hands. She stared at that raw grit much longer than required, then left without writing a single note, which was its own kind of unspoken respect. Theo arrived past midnight, his headlights sweeping across my dark bay. Wearing a sharp coat, he looked completely out of place among the heavy grease and shadows. We had not shared a room in 2 solid years, and you could see a heavy, awkward hesitation weighing him down at the entrance. That specific way old friends pause when way too much history blocks any normal small talk. "The deal closed," Theo murmured, "or it's about to. The Detroit account wants the battery module. All of it. Licensing supply the entire platform." Theo laughed, a dry, tired sound. "And they want the inventor's name right on the announcement. Forbes wants a cover story. The reclusive co-founder, the ultimate comeback they never saw coming. That is you, Eli, even after they stripped you bare. Standing in a dirty garage, your name on the exact breakthrough the entire industry has chased for a decade." I stood perfectly still by my workbench, when 9 days until close. The cover prints the exact morning the deal goes public. Theo's face hardened, the humor fading. "And here is why I drove an hour in the dark to tell you this in person instead of calling. Until that morning arrives, I cannot confirm a single word. The non-disclosure agreement is airtight. If I verify your stake, the valuation, or any detail before the announcement hits, the buyer walks, the deal dies, and 12 years of our hard work and sheer willpower die right along with it." He gestured with empty hands. "I came because you needed to hear this from a friend. I came because there is absolutely nothing else I am allowed to do, not yet anyway." I understood my friend's words, but I also felt the heavier truth buried underneath. The exact same way I listened for the hidden strain inside a broken engine. My custody hearing was looming. Just one sentence about my true wealth could completely rewrite how the judge saw this broke, struggling father in a single afternoon. I could finally hold my little girl again within days. It would only cost the deal my friend had bled 12 long years to build. And betraying the loyal friend standing in front of me. It meant turning my honest work into a dirty weapon, so I made my choice. "Then we stay quiet," I finally said. Theo stared at me, stunned by my resolve. "You could lose her waiting. You get that? You could do the strictly honorable thing here and lose your kid forever." "I could lose her any number of ways," I whispered. "But selling out my honor isn't one I could survive." Outside, Marin had returned to grab a folder left on my workbench. "You and I know life tests us in the dark." Marin stood by the gravel lot watching a well-dressed man leave my garage at 1 in the morning. She saw how we gripped hands at the door, a tight hold that spoke of shared hardship, loyalty, and unbroken will. She sensed immediately that my true story was far bigger than this rundown garage. Her gut instinct, sharpened by 15 long years on the job, screamed that she was missing something massive. It also told her that she secretly wanted to be missing it. She desperately hoped I was exactly the deeply honorable father I appeared to be. So she stood alone in the dark, checking her own emotions, just like she always did. Because wanting a father to win is the fastest way to read a case file wrong. She opened my file again the very next morning, the oldest section. The initial evaluation that stripped me of my daughter in the first place. She studied it the way someone reads a sentence that has suddenly started to sound like a total lie. The report was filed in just 11 days. Her own reports took 6 weeks, because 6 weeks was what it actually cost to find the truth. 2 required parent interviews were checked off as complete, but absolutely 0 notes were attached. The home inspection lacked photographs, even though the standard forms strictly demanded them. Every single character witness, my daughter's teacher, doctor, and neighbors, was marked unreachable after just 1 try and never called again. This was clearly the work of someone rushing through it on purpose. Marin had investigated enough shattered families to know the truth. You and I know what that means. They stripped my life away, never realizing my quiet success would make them regret ever looking down on me. Marin drove to the house on Congress Street, facing my ex at the kitchen table they took. Keeping things strictly, completely professional. She ran through the checklist, asking every single question exactly how the county demanded she ask them. Vanessa answered smoothly, playing the part of the perfect, practiced host. Until Marin asked why my first custody evaluation skipped the required interviews and photographs. Her smooth act instantly cracked, like thin ice over fast-moving, freezing water. "I wouldn't know how the county handles its own paperwork," my ex replied. She set her coffee cup down with deliberate care. "Royce knows plenty of powerful people with long memories who care deeply about how this ends. Remember that before wasting your hours on divorce paperwork for a case that is already decided." She said it with a smile, the polite click of a closing door rather than a loud slam. Marin did not write a single word of that down. She did not need notes to remember a blatant threat she would never forget. My little girl June was nearby, drifting to the doorway and acting shy around the stranger. Then suddenly her shyness vanished. You know how kids just drop their guard all at once. "Are you the lady who decides where I live?" my brave daughter asked. "I am the lady who helps the judge understand things," Marin gently replied. June weighed that heavy thought. My daddy can fix anything. He fixed a real bird once when it had a hurt wing. He made a tiny splint using a popsicle stick and tape, and it flew away right after. Then she lowered her sweet voice, sharing a secret that was worth keeping. "And he never says bad things about my mommy even when I ask him to take my side. He just says everybody loves me, and that is the part that matters." I tell her that constantly. You and I know children never realize when their simple words carry such massive weight. Marin carried my daughter's words out to her car, gripping the steering wheel for a long time before she trusted herself to start the engine. Back at the office that evening, she pulled my original family court evaluation to scan a clean copy into her active file. The system automatically opened the digital access log alongside it, just routine data that absolutely nobody ever bothers to read. But this time, she read it. My record was opened 11 times last month and edited twice, both changes coming from a completely different user account, not hers. Not her boss, not the first evaluator, nor a single person in that office she could actually identify. Someone was secretly inside my file. They tried rigging my case in the shadows. But stick with me, this is where all their money finally failed. The woman who showed up at Marin's garage that Tuesday was nearly 70, with Vanessa's jawline but none of her polished ease. She introduced herself in that gravel parking lot, having waited out there patiently for the better part of an hour. She gripped a plain manila envelope flat against her chest with both of her hands, like holding a heavy burden that has truly cost you everything to carry. "I am Greta Crane," she told her, Vanessa's own mother. "You will want to sit down for this, or you won't, but either way you will want to read it." Inside was a hidden financial record. A disclosure from 3 years ago, a stack of printed text messages, and one single sheet of notepaper written in a man's blunt handwriting. That disclosure listed the wealthy Halden founder. A massive stake by name and a projected value that made Marin go completely quiet. My ex-wife knew exactly what those shares would be worth, predicting the massive payout almost to the month. Those secret text messages between Vanessa and Greta dated back to the spring before our divorce filing. "We close before the cliff lifts," one of her emails read. "After that, it becomes marital property. He is a millionaire and the house is half his. Before that, he's just a guy in a garage and I take everything. Timing is everything, Mom. You taught me that." Reading that final printed page was my absolute rock bottom. Turns out, Royce Stratton held the financial note on that corrupt evaluator's failing practice. A massive balloon payment was coming due. That poor guy had zero way to pay it, and the paper in Royce's fist made the leverage obvious. In just a few sickening words, he laid out exactly what he would do to survive. "File it fast, keep it light on details. We will handle the rest from here." "She is my daughter," Greta said. Her voice went completely flat the way a dark road levels out right before a dangerous drop. "And I have watched her hand a good man's child over to a guy who literally buys off judges and calls that corruption winning. I just cannot forgive that. I won't sit in a church pew next to it on Sunday, pretending my throat isn't swelling shut." Greta shoved the envelope into Marin's hands, physically folding the caseworker's fingers tight around it with her own. "Whatever it costs you to use this evidence, just use it. It has already cost me the only daughter I have." For 15 years, Marin had stayed in that careful middle lane, completely neutral, totally exact, just reading case files. But she was not feeling neutral anymore, and she knew it. That realization hit her with the quiet, rock-solid certainty of seeing the whole ugly truth. She finally knew exactly which side of the line she stood on. She also knew exactly what taking a stand might do to a career built entirely on never choosing sides. Look, when she drove to my garage to tell me, you and I both know this was not official. We both understood that the second she stepped through my shop door. I poured us 2 mugs of black coffee that neither of us touched. We just sat on my workbenches while the mugs went entirely cold, the steam thinning into nothing. For a long time, neither of us said a word, but that heavy silence was not empty. It was a hard line drawn somewhere we could not even point to, and it was already shifting. And neither one of us was willing to be the first to call it out loud. Roy Stratton did not raise his voice about this either. That was the chilling family resemblance my ex-mother-in-law had not bothered mentioning. The legal motion arrived through the proper formal channels. Just the way these dirty tactics always do, dressed in polite clothes. A highly formal request demanding Marin be pulled from my custody case for conflicting interests. It cited her unscheduled visits and contact with members of my ex-wife's family. And it included what the filing called, in a phrase crafted by some very expensive corporate lawyer, her obvious personal investment in the respondent, meaning me. It was signed by a law firm that did a lot of cozy work for Drayton Development. Clipped to the back, supposedly helpful, like a very casual afterthought, was one quiet sentence reminding the county that Marin's office ran on a service contract which came up for renewal this spring. It was a brutal threat carrying the polite manners of a memo. Step back now, or the spring renewal will not be kind to you. It did not need to say another word, and so it absolutely did not. I found out because Greta did. We all know how bad news in a small county moves like water, rushing downhill, seeping into every low place. I stood in my garage bay, gripping the phone, feeling the ice-cold weight of their arrogance settling in my chest. This good woman was getting burned alive, simply because she had stood too close to a fire that would eventually consume them. I climbed back into my truck. I drove straight to Marin's office, waiting outside just like her mother had once waited for me. Because some heavy debts must be repaid in the exact currency they were lent. Step back, I told her, when she finally walked out into the gray afternoon. Recuse yourself. Just tell them whatever they want to hear and let it go. I'll find another way to fight this. I always find a way forward. I am not going to be the reason they take your life's work away. You gave 30 years to this. I refuse to be the bill that comes due. Marin stared at me, holding my gaze a beat too long for a professional relationship. You spent this whole case shielding everyone else instead of protecting your own life, she said. Your partner's deal, your kid's name. You stayed quiet when speaking up would have won you full custody. And now me, she shook her head, slow and certain. No, I read case files honestly for a living. This one I am reading true, and I am proudly putting my name on the bottom of it. And I am going to let the court system do whatever it is going to do. She filed her bold new custody recommendation the very next morning. It relied entirely on what she had witnessed with her own 2 eyes, and what she could verify through the access logs and Greta's sealed envelope. It strongly recommended restoring my full custody rights before the final court hearing. She signed it knowing the terrible cost, showing real courage, and her steady hand never shook. That weekend, I quietly repaired her bicycle. She mentioned it weeks ago, a $40 thrift store bike with a broken chain she never got around to fixing. I hadn't forgotten. I stripped it down on my workbench and rebuilt it by Sunday afternoon. I scrubbed the rusty chain clean, carefully oiling it link by link. I adjusted the brakes and added a new bell since the old one was cracked. I never said a single word to her about what I did. I left it leaning against her office wall with a folded note that simply said, "It rolls now." She found it Monday morning, standing quietly with her hand on the worn seat before heading inside. My final custody hearing and a massive business deal were colliding in the exact same week. I could feel both heavy clocks ticking down toward that exact same morning of reckoning. And I honestly had no idea which of those two would strike first, or how much energy I had left for the final climb. Stick with me, Royce made his final play, the desperate move of a man who only understood financial pressure. A man who firmly believed every single door would eventually yield to sheer force. He shoved my custody hearing forward a second time, pushing even harder, burning massive favors to manipulate the legal calendar until it landed on a Wednesday morning, 2 weeks early. His cruel endgame was painfully obvious and incredibly simple: to crush me completely before my breakthrough could ever reach the public eye. To end the case while I was still a struggling father in a garage, with nothing but a cot, a tarp, and my unyielding drive. But he had no idea. He never stopped to measure the unstoppable determination of the father he was trying to ruin. He scheduled that hearing for the exact morning the entire country would finally discover who I really was. You and I know that the night before, I wasn't stressing over his court calendar. I only focused on the groundbreaking circuit board under my tarp, the work finally complete. Every cell was wired and every connection checked twice. Let's start right here. His daughter June, shivering in her winter coat on an old bucket, sharing that freezing garage with him. "You want to start it?" he asked her softly. She looked up like he had handed her the moon, her heart completely full, even if his pockets were totally empty. He pointed to the small black switch in the corner, and she carefully pressed her tiny thumb right against it. Looking up for his silent permission, she saw him nod, and she finally flipped the switch. The machine's controller woke. A row of indicator lights flashed across the metal rack, before glowing bright and completely steady. A solid, unbroken streak of green, the very first surge of real power this machine had ever drawn from the world. It wasn't flashy, no loud roar, no wild sparks, and absolutely no giant spectacle. It simply worked, silently and beautifully. And that was the quiet victory Eli Brandt had chased through 12 exhausting years of sheer unbroken willpower. "You did it, Daddy," June whispered. "We did it," he replied, holding on to this sweet moment tight before the rest of the world tried to steal it. Meanwhile, across town, a phone buzzed right in a Forbes magazine editor's hand. Far away, a massive printing press started rolling. The morning cover with Eli's face was locked in, completely beyond the control of those who doubted him. The dismissed father, behind a billion-dollar comeback, was finally about. To see his name plastered on newsstands and glowing on screens across all 50 states. 9 days in, and Royce's deep pockets could no longer buy enough power to bury Eli's massive success. Inside the Washtenaw County Courthouse, the room felt cramped and blindingly bright. You and I know the cruel story Vanessa and Royce's lawyer spun to make Eli look completely worthless. A practiced lie polished to a beautiful shine. An unstable, jobless man living in a dirty garage, supposedly unable to provide. Just a poor father without a single piece of paper to prove his true worth. They flashed photos of his cot and tools, framing his deep dedication to his project as pathetic failure. They read that biased custody evaluation aloud, very slowly, pretending it was absolute truth, rather than a report bought and paid for in 11 days. But they were still talking when the bailiff's phone suddenly lit up. Then the clerk's screen flashed, followed by a dozen phones buzzing in the gallery. A gentle rising chorus of ringtones that broke all courtroom rules but simply could not be stopped. Because at the top of the hour, Eli's massive business deal went completely public. Halden Power Systems was acquired through a historic licensing contract. The payout was so massive it completely shifted the gravity in that courtroom, staring back from the magazine. The secretive co-founder, the genius single dad who actually owned the patents. Right there, wearing dirty coveralls inside that rundown garage in Ypsilanti, Michigan. Then, the heavy wooden doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. Greta Crane marched down the center aisle to take the stand, refusing to even look at her daughter. Not even once during the entire walk-up. She handed over the texts, the legal disclosures, Royce's handwritten note, and then she spoke. Under oath, with a voice that flattened every single lie, she revealed exactly what her daughter actually knew when she found out, and what Royce's money had secretly bought. Theomatics immediately followed her. With their gag order lifted, they proved under oath the brilliant wealthy giant Eli had always quietly been. But Vanessa wasn't even listening to the testimony anymore. She was staring at his success, drowning in regret. Truly, the best revenge is making them watch you win. She stared at that photo. Right behind me sat my old red toolbox with its scuffed, worn handles. The exact same one she called garbage, right beside the notebook she told me to throw away. The truth finally hit her all at once, way too late to do her any real good. That the exact thing she threw right out of our home was the very blueprint that built the success she spent 14 months trying to steal. She finally saw it clear as day. But realizing it changed nothing, and I did not stand up there to gloat. When the judge asked if I had anything to add, I stood up and said one thing. I never wanted the house, I told them. I never wanted the car. They could have kept everything, every single board, every single bolt. I only wanted my daughter. That is the sole reason I stepped inside this building. It is all I have fought for this whole time. Nothing on that magazine cover changes a single word of it. The court restored my joint custody, full, equal, and effective right then and there. They also ordered a full review of that first evaluation. Everyone in the room knew it would end careers by spring. Across the aisle, I watched Roy Straighten's power drain right out of him in real time. His phone sat dark in his hand as his lawyer leaned in to whisper something he could not even answer. Just like that, case closed. That thick wall standing between me and Marin, the woman assigned to evaluate my life, simply vanished into thin air. I looked across that crowded courtroom and caught Marin staring back at me. We did not say a single word. But that gaze lingered a beat longer than any normal look between two strangers ever does. And honestly, that was everything. It was exactly all it ever needed to be. Royce Straighten lost his massive riverfront development deal before the month even ended. The county never officially punished him, not on paper anyway, or in a way you could easily point out. His project partners simply sat down and read through the court records. They saw a man who bought a custody evaluation the way normal guys buy a sandwich. And one by one, they stopped returning his calls until absolutely nobody was left to answer him. Vanessa kept the house on Congress Street, but now she wanders those rooms finally understanding, fully grasping what she failed to value while it sat right there on her own dusty shelf. And regret is a much heavier burden to carry through life than my tiny apartment ever was. I kept my old garage, though I really did not need it anymore. I could have bought the entire building, the whole block, even the street it sat on. I kept it because I was still Walt Brandt's boy, a man who worked with his bare hands. You and I know you do not stop being that guy just because a magazine slapped your face on their cover. I brought Hank Dolan right back to manage the front. Put him at the counter and told him rent was zero now, but the wages were real. Look, it eventually came out that I had quietly set up a trust in June's name a full year before this nightmare even began. Real money carefully set aside from my founder's agreement the very day she was born, just in case whatever crazy thing happened to me. My daughter would never be reduced to some file stating she came from nothing. It is about will, right? Yesterday, June taped a brand new drawing to the cabinet door, right over where the old faded one hung. 3 figures this time, sketched in careful crayon. Me with a wrench in my hand, and herself standing right there in the middle. Right in the middle where she always belonged, plus a woman off to the side, drawn slightly smaller. Marin holding a folder, drawn with that special care a kid only gives to the people she decides to keep. Down on the workbench below it, my old notebook lay open. The rubber band finally snapped off. Right there, scribbled in the margins of Walt's old book, were 4 words that changed everything. You can't sell what's worth keeping. Marin showed up that Saturday. No official clipboard, no checklists, just her seeing the success he built. Outside, the new bicycle gleamed in the morning sun, a small symbol of how far he had come. Eli handed her a cup of coffee. This time it was steaming hot. She held the warm mug tightly, feeling the shift in his life. June is inside, he said. She wants to show you the engine. You never got to see what we built last time. I did not, Marin admitted. Neither mentioned the success that made it possible. They simply did not need to. They stood in his thriving shop. The cold morning air was behind them, but his hard-won success pulled them into the light. You and I know that silence, the sweet, victorious quiet of a man who proved everyone wrong. That was all they needed. They stripped him of his house and car. They even snatched his daughter away for a time. All done using high-priced lawyers, expensive suits, and stacks of heartless paperwork. But a father's fierce drive to succeed cannot be crushed by legal documents. And that is exactly why their system could never stop his quiet rise to the top. His wealth lived in his calloused hands, a simple red toolbox, and a brilliant daughter who understood the soul of an engine. He was just biding his time, waiting to build an empire from nothing and leave his doubters in the dust. Now you and I must face a question that divides absolutely everyone. If they stripped away your life, only to watch you rebuild a masterpiece from $200 and absolute willpower, would you ever let them share in your brand new success, or let them regret what they threw away? Comment below. I read every comment. If this tale of ultimate triumph inspired you, subscribe. See you in the next video. This specific story is a work of fiction. The names, characters, and events are fully imagined. No real-world person is being depicted here. But the pain and the legal battles that drive people to rebuild, those are incredibly real. Spouses weaponizing control inside a marriage. The sneaky hiding of wealth right before a divorce. Heartless custody battles fought over fake paperwork happen every day. Good people get blindsided, but they can still rise up and win. If you or someone you love is currently fighting a bitter divorce or custody battle, please reach out to a skilled family law attorney to protect your hard-earned assets and, most of all, your children. Free legal assistance is out there through tools like the Women's Law website. Knowing your rights is essential. It is the ultimate foundation for building your triumphant future.